Welcome to this accessible teaching resources at Glasgow Caledonian University session. The presenter will be Aidan Johnson, who is the Digital Learning Systems Developer at Glasgow Caledonian University. The university have been with us for almost 20 years. They have 3 campuses, one in Glasgow in Scotland, one in London, England, and one in New York. And so Aidan will start in a moment, but just for the second, let me explain. There is a chat panel on the right-hand side of your screen where you can ask questions. If you require captioning today, that is at the bottom of your screen in the center, and you can switch those on. The slides are also available at the bottom of the screen in the center, and the recording will be available after today's session, so you don't need to take notes if you don't want to. On that, I will hand over to Aidan now. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Ellen, and good afternoon, everyone. Good morning or good evening, depending where you are in the world. I'm coming to you live from very sunny Scotland, and sadly not our New York campus, which would be more preferable. But it's great to see so many people here today, and I'm really pleased to be able to come along today to really tell you our story of really what we've been doing at Glasgow Caledonian University, very much in partnership, as Gillian said, with Blackboard. We've been a customer for many years now, but we've actually been taking advantage of the Blackboard Ally tool to help us on the accessibility journey. And I'm going to tell you our story today of how we have been working really hard at Glasgow Caledonian University over the past year to really look at how we help our staff make teaching resources and teaching materials more accessible, and how that benefits our students. So without further ado, I'll just give you some context. So obviously we are no different to anyone else in the world at the moment. When the COVID pandemic began to emerge in early 2020, we, like other universities around the world, had to really pivot to online learning overnight. There was really no planning went into this. We literally had to do our best and work as hard as we could to ensure that the continuity of delivery of learning and teaching continued. And our department, particularly me and my job looking after the BLE, in this case, it was Blackboard Learn prior to moving to Blackboard Ultra-Based Navigation later in the summer. I'll talk about that later. We were suddenly thrust front and center, and we really became the go-to people for help and advice, and that wasn't just for improving and really continuing the learning experience, but other issues that arose, and one of those was the issues around accessibility, and more importantly, accessibility compliance, and that's what I'm going to outline to you all today. So predominantly, the initial problems that we saw were to do with the webinar tools. In this case, we had Collaborate Ultra was the main go-to tool because it was integrated with the BLE. But the issue we had was it did not provide automated captioning, so that was a challenge for us to look at that. And the second emerging issue we had to deal with was the general accessibility of learning materials deposited within our BLE. So the next phase was to really start identifying solutions, and we had been looking at accessibility in learning and teaching systems long before COVID. We looked at started scanning the horizon, looking to see what tools and services would be a good fit to complement our existing learning and teaching systems. But obviously the focus was on tools that were not only intuitive, but had to be easy to use, not just for our staff, but also for our student users as well. And heavy consideration was given that the tools must and really should fit into the existing academic workflows in regards to content and learning, teaching, creation of modules, but also integration with our existing tools as well. So I'm pleased to say that early on 2 tools were identified: Blackboard Ally, which we were looking at long before the pandemic began, and secondary Planet eStream is a streaming media server in the cloud. And we looked at the Azure Cognitive Services plugin that actually translates speech to text and I'm going to talk about these today. So as I said, we started rolling out Ally before the pandemic began, and it was a very popular, very well received tool at our university in helping not only staff to meet accessibility challenges, but obviously giving our students more options. And again, Ally can probably encapsulate it in three main steps. The first is checking the module materials against accessibility standards, giving an assessment and gauging the accessibility in obviously the scales that are provided on screen from low up to perfect, but more importantly, giving very useful feedback to help staff improve the accessibility of their learning content. And then more importantly is Ally giving the students the ability to access Ally resources in a variety of formats. And what you're seeing on screen here is one example of a module that we have set up, whereby you can see the feedback that's given to the academic is that there is improvements to be made here. And Ally very helpfully reviews this and then feeds back to the academic what is required. And this has been the most useful thing that staff have found, is they don't need to go on many accessibility training courses or really remember what's going on in accessibility training courses. They have this really intuitive teacher or guide to lead them through what is required in terms of making the resources much more accessible. And obviously other resources such as this PDF journal paper, and just checking those resources as well. So it's not just stuff that the academics are generating themselves, it's stuff that is actually being utilised in the learning teaching experience from other areas as well, to help staff ensure that their modules or their courses are accessible as they can be. And as we can see here, it's just a simple piece of feedback is putting a description in, and you can actually add the image description all within the Ally environment. And you know, that's the item. The accessibility flag is then lowered. They no longer have to, but importantly, it tells the instructor why it's important and what putting a good description in will help those with additional requirements to engage with the materials themselves, and advice in this example what is a good alt description to give. And that is really the benefit staff have found, is that this is not only helping them understand accessibility, it's actually helping them meet the accessibility requirements, but educating them as well. And some have actually said it's been quite fun. In the process, they found the learning process to be educational as well, and help them improve their practice to make their learning and teaching more inclusive. So we've definitely found the advantages of that. And from the student perspective, what you can see here is the different types of resources that can be downloaded. We have not enabled the language translation just because that's a policy decision at our university, that we're not able to use that tool. So we use all the other accessible alternative formats within Ally at the institution. And again, students have fed back to us that they really like having these different formats available to them, particularly if it's a really long journal paper and they can listen to that while they're out walking the dog rather than reading it. So it has been successful in our rollout. We've uncovered a few interesting findings. The amount of content obviously has increased, but the accessibility of content overall has increased as well, which is really encouraging that staff are actually using the tool effectively. Most formats that we found within the VLE tend to be PDF documents or other presentation materials. And it's important that we know what type of content's in the system so that we can focus on CPD, additional CPD resources for staff around digital accessibility, to know what type of materials and content they are creating. And I'm really pleased to say that as of 2020, the end of the second trimester in the previous academic year, most modules had an Ally score of 67.1% or above, which rates them as green or dark green on the accessibility rating scales. And we're really pleased that we are moving in the right direction. In terms of improvement year on year, we can see here that we are making improvements to the Ally scores, and we are taking it small increments. It'll be interesting to see how this performs year on year. But I said we've only got a limited amount of data to go on, but as you can see, we are definitely moving in the right direction when it comes to making enhancements and improvements to accessibility. So in terms of the issues, because obviously it's not all been plain sailing, we have identified issues such as encrypted content or content, believe it or not, that could induce seizures. These have been removed completely, and Ally gave us that oversight and that flag, which we're really pleased to allow us to actually intervene and help our staff address those issues. We have a lot of library scanning documents within the VLE, and these were not OCR compliant, which means that they cannot be read easily by screen reading software. We have dramatically made improvements in this area with our library colleagues to reduce that from nearly 4,500 documents down to 2,100 documents, and we are making improvements to that all the time. So again, this is where Ally has come in really useful to help us identify other issues in other areas so we can actually enhance and improve practice. And as you can see, there's other stats here where we've had other improvements that Ally has brought in terms of scanning documents and identifying accessibility issues and problems. So I'm really pleased to say that the improvements are clear to see, and they will continue as time goes on. So the second issue on top of looking at issues around accessibility for learning teaching materials is that of video and audio. So at GCU, we have, like other universities, utilised a variety of platforms. Collaborate was the initial platform, but we have expanded into Teams to ensure that we gave staff a variety of different options, because Teams has become the kind of de facto tool for staff to use at the university for communication and business continuity. So it was inevitable it was going to spill into the VLE and the learning and teaching experience as well. So with that, we had to then review, in terms of the legislation, how we ensure that video and audio materials that are deposited in the Planet eStream streaming media service that we have integrated with the VLE using LTI integration actually meets the legislation. And as you can see on the table here, we have a variety of different formats between recorded video and live video, and what the legislative requirements are, and what is considered good practice in terms of the actual output itself. So we have been very clear in identifying the different types of video and how it is used and how it needs to meet the legislation. And with the streaming media service, we had access to a variety of different integrations for captioning services, third-party captioning services, one of which was the free Mozilla open source one, which, if you've used it, is not very reliable, and initial piloting showed that was not going to be suitable for use. So we then looked to Planet eStream, who advised us that Microsoft Azure has a very good AI engine for text to or speech to text through their cognitive services. So we are an Azure customer, and we investigated this. It provided us with a very cost-effective solution, which I believe was 79 pence expat per hour of audio video transcribed, which is extremely cost effective in comparison to other services. So we were in a position to take that forward then to a pilot with a variety of staff members to see how that would actually operate. And the pilot ran at the beginning of this year. And as I said, it automatically, once it's uploaded to Planet eStream, this is all done through the VLE LTI integration. The lecturers then have the option to then have it sent off through clicking a button in Planet eStream to be transcribed or captioned. It allows the educator to then easily edit the transcription once it's returned, and can then review the subtitles for accuracy. And in terms of accuracy, we need things like making sure that it's picked words up correctly, that any kind of taxonomy or terminology, particularly in scientific subjects, are corrected. And Scottish accents, I will say, are sometimes picked up quite badly. So we have to have that degree of accuracy and checking and the tool, the Planet eStream subtitle editor, enables that quite nicely. The SRT caption file that goes with that transcription can then be taken forward to generate a transcript quite easily. You can actually pull the time codes out and just keep the text, and that allows staff to go over and above, as was shown on the previous table, of not only providing captions but also providing a transcript as well, which again is considered accessibility best practice. It's been generally received as being quite straightforward to use once staff have been trained, and they like the fact that everything is all existing within the one area of use, which is the journey begins in the VLE, which staff like. They like the fact they're not going between two systems as much, which works out really, really well. So the pilot gave us a really good insight into the staff workflows, as I mentioned earlier, and how they were actually going to use this, but also how this was then going to help staff to meet the legislative requirements. So in terms of the workflow that I've mentioned earlier, and how we've tried to make this as seamless and painless as possible for staff throughout the pilot. The journey begins on the left-hand side here, where it's loaded into eStream via the VLE module LTI integration. It's then sent off to be transcoded using Planet eStream into streaming formats. The lecturer then, once it's been processed and is accessible, can then send it off to be captioned. It's then returned. The user goes into the web facility in eStream to edit the captions and check for accuracy and amend as appropriate. And then, if required, they can actually go forward and download the SRT file that's been returned from Azure and convert that into a plain text transcript as required, which again, I said, is kind of going over and above the legislative requirements. But again, it has worked really well for those users who do require that. So in terms of the workflow itself, as I said, it's all integrated nicely within our VLE environment. We are a Ultra based navigation customer, but we do use original course design, and within the module you can actually move into the Planet eStream environment very quickly and easily to access the Azure transcription services. And from here you can access the subtitle editor very quickly, again without leaving the VLE environment, and you can actually then go in, play the video back at double speed, triple speed, or any speed that suits, and actually review the accuracy of the subtitles that are presented, the captions that are presented, quickly and easily. Okay, moving on. Post-pilot feedback, what have we really picked up from this? So the issues we've picked up on that we need to work on with regards to this is the processing speed. Everybody throwing videos, large videos, particularly from systems like Collaborate Ultra, for captioning, tend to be 45 minutes to 1 hour long. So this does take a little bit of time. It also is a problem depending on your upload speed, which I'll come to later. So we have to make staff aware that this is not something that you can turn around quickly. It does require a little bit of planning. And in terms of best practice, you should really take your Collaborate Ultra recordings or your Teams recordings and action them when you've got time, and let students know that it would be available immediately with captions. We do advise them to check for accuracy, because no captioning service is accurate, particularly if you have a Scottish accent. As I said, you need to factor in accents, dialect, the audio quality. We do advise staff in terms of what's best practice and using a headset, a quiet environment. You know, really these tips and tricks that can make the audio experience much better, but in turn the time-saving advantages that has when it comes to actually then actioning the captions or the subtitles to make it more accurate. As I said, we are advising staff that if they can use transcripts, that is a good idea. It's not legislative requirement to have it for video. By default, you just have to have subtitles, but we are allowing staff to use the transcript facility and show them how to use that if they need it. But the biggest thing we've come up against with home working is the upload speed. particularly for uploading video and audio items into our streaming media server within the BLE. As we all know, our download speed in comparison to our upload speed is distinctly different. It is usually quite low. It's not symmetrical. So, for example, somebody with a broadband speed of 80 meg will have a 20 meg upload speed. So that takes longer to upload to any service, whether it be YouTube or Planet eStream. So we have introduced and made staff aware of the fact that our streaming media service has a queuing system, whereby you can actually bulk upload and leave it overnight or leave it in the background to save time and to allow files to be processed whilst you do other things. So again, these are all very interesting things that we've picked up on as the pilots have evolved and as we have rolled these services out to staff. In terms of what we've done to help and support our staff, not just with Ally, but with Planet eStream, and just general accessibility around the learning and teaching experience for our students. We have a GCU Going Digital initiative, which was launched just after the pandemic, which was really designed to help and support staff and to really help them make that transition, that pivot to online learning quickly and easily, and to assure them that support and advice was given to the most common used tools. So with webinars, as you can see here, which we ran for various different pedagogical purposes. We have created their own resource bank for either linking to Ally resources that Blackboard have created, which are fantastic, or to our own Planet eStream user guides, which really show the journey from within our Blackboard learning environment, so that it is really focused in on what our academics will do or need to do in order to help make their learning and teaching materials more accessible. We've also had Padlets, which have been a really good way for us to gather what the problems and the challenges and the issues are, and then make that available to other staff members as a really growing resource bank as well, but also give staff and users a chance to actually ask us questions. And a lot of this has actually informed not just the outcomes from the pilot, but actually helped us to make improvements going forward and in terms of where we want to be in terms of accessibility and accessibility compliance. So in terms of these two initiatives, what does this mean for our university as we go forward? So as I've mentioned, the two tools have been extremely beneficial. I can't say enough that both have been excellent for helping our staff and our student members, and not just those with the disability requirements or needs. The tools have gone a long way to helping our users just generally to access materials in a more meaningful and a different way. They've helped our staff to meet the legislative requirements. As I said, Ally has been so beneficial in giving that crucial feedback and that understanding of what is required to make learning materials accessible in order to give our students a more inclusive learning experience. We now have the captioning solution available to all our staff and our students as well. And we've rolled Planet eStream out now to everybody, and it's been so well used that we're seeing massive amounts of traffic going through the system, which is fantastic. But more importantly, highly accessible learning materials are now being made available to our students. So in terms of this is where we are in terms of our journey, where we've come from and where we're going. And I'm really pleased to say that we will be continuing with both services and continue to promote them to our staff users going forward. And we're quite excited to see what Ally is going to produce in the future. So we're really, really pleased with how both tools have really helped to shape accessibility practice at our university. Thank you.
Aidan, thank you so much for that. That was really informative. You've obviously done an awful lot of work there at Glasgow Caledonian University to support your students, and that's what this is about at the end of the day. And we've seen at Blackboard, and I'm sure you've seen it in your institution and everyone on the call, seen that a huge increase in the alternative format use by students, and it's made a big difference to them having those available through them. particularly as they've been pushed to online and blended learning through the pandemic. So thank you for your really informative talk. We have, there's been a good discussion around the chat. Firstly, I must just apologise for everybody because of the issues that we had with the captions at the beginning. I'm glad we got them working, but I'm sorry they weren't there in the first instance. They should have been, and they clearly weren't. So our apologies for that. And now let me move on to the questions. So Georgia asked, how many colleges and faculties are there at GCU that were involved with the pilot?
Okay, so we have, we've actually got quite a simple setup at GCU. In Glasgow, we have 3 schools that were operate there. We have 1 school in London and we have 1 school in New York. So it's kept quite simple in terms of the structures. And I'm really pleased to say that where I work is in the centralised service in academic development, student learning. And as I said, we have ownership of the Blackboard learning environment. We have the process and business owners. But we work in a kind of hub and spoke approach with our colleagues in the schools. And because we are quite a small university in Glasgow, it's really easy to facilitate that those relationships. And the good thing is, when we have been rolling these new services out and testing and piloting, there is no shortage of people to actually come on board. It begins with the learning technologists, and then it kind of permeates out, and they know, I know someone who would be interested in that, or they always have staff in mind. But I think generally we find that a lot of staff, when we put it out more generally as a call to join the pilot, staff were quite willing to come forward, because based upon what we proposed in the pilot, they immediately identified they had a need for this. And they were, I suppose, had that kind of pioneering spirit of, yeah, I'm willing to sign up for this and try this, warts and all. And as I said, the only expectation we had is that they would test this, but more importantly, feedback to us. And as I said, it was a process of continual improvement and review the whole way through this, Gillian, and we're still learning. Just for example, just this week, we're having to turn on the download option, because students have actually fed back that they want to be able to download the video and audio learning materials from Planet eStream, because they're working on oil rigs, they're working in remote places, and that's not something we considered. We thought a streaming media server would be the most kind of cost-effective way and the easiest way to deliver to people in varying internet connections, but we never considered that. But we are still continually improving. I mean, the fact that this has been requested and it didn't come out of the pilot doesn't mean we're not going to act on it. We are continually reviewing this as time goes on, as we are with Ally as well. We have great plans for Ally, including a cleaning up your course event, which we're hoping to run early in 2022, where we're going to challenge people with actually going in and looking at the course Ally scores with a view to making improvements and hopefully creating that little bit kind of spirit of competition amongst our users.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that's interesting. And we very often hear with customers that message about this is a journey, it's step by step. It gives a lot of reassurance, I think, and I wondered if you find that with your academic staff, that they don't have to do everything at once, because sometimes people like yourselves can be a little bit worried how academic staff are going to receive Ally, and I often hear that messages like that are very reassuring to staff, and it was nice to hear that your staff received it very well. Did you have any challenges there, or it sounded like it was all good?
I think initially it was getting the message out that this is here to help. It's not, we're not snooping on your courses. And that was the core message with both of these tools, where they're here to help. They've been designed to fit into your workflow, all within the VLE. You know, you're not running between different systems. Ally operates in the module the same way as Planet eStream. But the message, the real big sell was on the positive impact that this will make, not just to the student experience as we mentioned, but the tools here to help you. And I think once people saw it wasn't a tool to spy upon people or a stick to beat them with, that we know your score, we know your modules aren't accessible. And when we sold it much more as something to help. And I think once they saw both sides of the coin, from the kind of the helpful advice it gives them in improving the score, but also what the students get out of it, that's when they actually thought, okay, this is actually a tool that's going to have impact, and it's not just for students with accessibility requirements. As I said, the most popular feature we're seeing and getting feedback on is the ability to take really big journals and turn them into audio, and then take them and listen to them, either at double speed or half speed or whatever speed suits, and not have to read it. And they can actually do something else. They can walk the dog, do the laundry, do other things, but having access to that additional format has made a big difference.
Yeah, and I've done that myself and find it really useful whilst I've been out walking the dog or something. One question on that feedback and rolling it out through your institution is, are you looking at the reports and maybe breaking them down by departments or categories and sending those out to departments at the university?
At the moment, Gillian, we do produce the high-level reports. We have kind of disseminated them, not so much by area. As I said, we literally launched it, and we really took a kind of year-end look at it, and we then disseminated that out, as I showed in the slide, of the year-on-year improvement to show the difference it has actually made. The next plan we have, or plans for future improvement, is to open that up, as you say, to give areas access to the statistical data, to see where improvements can be made. Because again, as I talked about in my presentation, we've identified other things like the OCR practice of scanned resources from the library to make improvements there. So again, if we did go down this road of disseminating reports to areas, it would be under the guise of, you're doing great work, but here's how you can actually make improvements. Did you know the library has this service, or don't scan your own stuff, or if you're putting stuff up, be kind of cognizant of using Ally to check it. So it will be done from the carrot rather than the stick approach, definitely.
And that's where a lot of the clients are that I deal with here in the UK and in Europe are in a similar position to yours. And I'm just going to slip in a shameless plug for the next European Ally user group, which anybody is welcome to come to wherever you are in the globe, which is on Thursday, the 25th of November. Now it's 3 p.m. UK time. So whatever time it is where you are, add 15 minutes and it'll be the same time, because it's 2:45 here currently. And we will be looking in that meeting just at reporting, setting up categories and reporting. And there's a couple of clients that will be sharing their experiences of what they've done. So it's really good food for thought there. Now, I know we've only got 2 minutes left, but there was another question. Have you found the OCR documents to be an accurate portrayal of the actual text? And that's from Abigail.
Yeah, Abigail, that's been interesting. Again, we've let our library colleagues, they've been feeding back to us on improvements they've been making on that. And the good thing is, because they are making that judgment, and they are the best people to make the judgment, the first pass has not always been the best. And they have been looking at that to actually see if they can make enhancements. It's not perfect, but it is something that we are looking at. And one thing it's actually pushed us to as well is to look at, instead of using OCR scanning, engaging with our publishers to find if we can get stuff in other formats as well that are probably much better in terms of accessibility and accessibleness than the OCR version. So it's been a learning curve for us as well, and we are trying to move away from OCR scanning to actually retrieving proper published accessible formats from our partners in the publishing world and the library world.
Fantastic. There was another question about dealing with increased staffing that you've got, but I'm quite conscious it's 1:45 now. and the next session will be starting shortly. So I will end it there. I will say I'm going to share the link to that meeting that I just mentioned. I'm just grabbing that behind the scenes. I'm going to say, Aidan, thank you again for a very interesting presentation and discussion today. Thank you everybody for your questions. The recording and the slides will be shared. And that's it. Yes, I'll just grab that link and come back. It's just been a little bit slow. If you're in the Ally user group area, it's under the European section there. I just seem to be struggling with the speed of my machine to get that at the moment. So apologies. I think it's running too slowly. Or you can email me at gillian.fielding@Blackboard and I'll make sure you get those details to that session. I'll pop that in the chat. Right, thank you very much indeed,
Thanks,
everyone.
everyone. Have a good day.